Okay, hi, this is Elliot Fishman. It's Wednesday, it's 12 o'clock, so I promised you we'd have a special guest. And with me today is Kimberly Powell, who's our guest speaker at Hopkins, our visiting professor today, actually. Kimberly is head of deep learning in healthcare for NVIDIA, which is the leader in everything you want to know about deep learning, from cars to medicine. And she's going to be sharing her experience with us tonight, but she's nicely agreed to be our guest on Facebook Live, so welcome.
Thank you, Elliot.
So let me ask you some tough questions here. So what's happening in deep learning? What's happening well, Kimberly, let me just also say Kimberly's expertise is in many things, but she's focused on medicine, which is obviously important to all of us. So what's happening with deep learning in healthcare from your perspective?
You know, we've spent a lot of time over the last 5 years building pretty great systems to give the capability of subject matter experts to start exploring deep learning. And we've been able to have the pleasure of working with Elliot and the team here, who are experts in their field, radiologists in specialties such as pancreatic cancer. And we're really trying to expose these tools, this capability, this new tool called artificial intelligence, to subject matter experts and specialists in particular fields. So in the area of radiology, it's a pretty obvious place to start, because where deep learning and artificial intelligence really made its first leap in bounds and paradigm shifts is in the area of computer vision. So how can we look at images and get some knowledge out of those images that can help create better outcomes for patients? It can create more efficiencies within the radiology workflow. It can even create lots of efficiencies within the hospitals and how they're run, being able to just screen the images coming off the scanners and saying, this is a critical finding, please put this patient at the top of the list. So we're working with a lot of the world-leading clinical institutions, Hopkins being the leader in clinical care and specialty care, and world-renowned radiologists and research all in one place, and really trying to build these tools so that it's very accessible to folks that are dealing with patients day in and day out and have the data that they've been curating for decades.
So I know you've done, you know the entire spectrum of what NVIDIA does. Do you see medicine being more difficult or different? Everything's a different challenge, but people always say medicine's unique.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, no, it's very true. We've been pioneering the self-driving car for somewhere over 6 to 7 years at least. And if you think about it, that we chose that problem because one, it's very impactful, right? We're losing millions of people a year to car accidents. So it's a really important problem. Two, it's a really hard problem, right? For a car to be able to drive itself and do it safely, it's hard. And then, does NVIDIA have a unique role to play in solving this problem? And the answer was yes to all three of those things. And so we've dedicated the last 6, 7 years to helping build this artificial intelligence computing platform for the self-driving car. We made a tremendous amount of progress, which you probably saw at CES. We've inked deals with Uber and VW and Tesla and the leading car manufacturers to get to the self-driving car revolution. And we're still many years away from that. And you think about what a car has to do, it's actually a relatively simple problem. You have a steering wheel, a gas, and a brake. And then cars exist in a very structured environment. We already have lots of rules that apply to driving a car, which is you stay in a lane, you abide by these signs or these traffic lights. In medicine, none of that exists. Every single human is an individual with different characteristics than the next human next to them. And the rules of medicine are sort of, being made every day. We were talking a lot about immunotherapies that are literally coming to market on a weekly basis here. And that is because there is so much variability between patients, and anything from their genetics to the environment they've been exposed to the age, to their ancestry, that we're going to need, 1,000, a million times more complexity in the system to really get to intelligence in medicine in a holistic standpoint. So medicine is unique and an infinitely larger problem in my mind.
So you were at RSNA this year. I know,
Yeah.
way in the back, though everyone seemed to manage to find you.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. Deep learning wasn't supposed to be a very important part of RSNA, but it ended up being the single most important thing. I think we were the head of Siemens, who basically admitted that people were speaking more about NVIDIA than Siemens, GE, Philips, Toshiba all combined. How do you think the average radiologist you dealt with? Because sometimes people we speak to are concerned that, oh my God, AI, they give AI a lot of credit, it's going to take their job. But how do you see that process, working out?
I think that, some of the early wins or maybe early evidence of deep learning in radiology was always compared to being able to beat a particular human, do something better than a human. But the reality is there's so much opportunity in the healthcare system that doesn't have to be about, being better than a human, but rather it's, if you look at your everyday life, what do you have on the order of 60 to 70% of the cases you read a day are normal. And wouldn't it be nice if we could somehow, take those normal studies off your desk and put the abnormals as your primary work? So you can be dedicating all of that extra time, all of the knowledge and brain power you've amassed over, your 30-year career to those patients who need it the most. And so instead of, saying we're doing something better than humans, let's just do something on behalf of humans to make the whole system work better. So I think radiologists were seeing that at the RSNA. There was, some 60 or so deep learning and artificial intelligence startups that were there, and you could see a lot of the applications now are addressing things like how do we better operate, the work list and the work that the radiologists have to do. How do we better, triage patients so that the patients who need it the most are getting attended to earlier? How do we do simple things like screening in a more efficient way to save time? And so I think a lot of people's, tune has changed. The other thing is there's a massive amount of data that we continue to throw at clinicians, right? As we go down the precision medicine path, we've got to have genomics and proteomics and imaging and population health data. And as we just talked about, all the new therapies that are hitting the market on, it doesn't take 2 years for a new therapy to hit, it's taking a couple weeks for new therapies to hit. So how do we use artificial intelligence to really take all that data and bring it as a tool to you rather than something that is, sort of a daunting challenge about how do I, get access to that data and make meaning of it in the allotted time that you have every given day.
Right. It's really critical. I think what you're saying is good. The truth is, I think we all try to do a good job, but you look at the error rates is 30%. You look at the fact that people speak how when there's a new therapy that comes out, it takes a minimum of 10 years for it to be implemented in practice. That's just not good things. So from a company perspective, I know NVIDIA is developing the technology of whether it's the hardware, a lot of the software, the processes. How do you, if I'm a radiologist in practice or I'm in a research institution like Hopkins, how do I get involved? What do you think I need to be thinking about? Because a lot of it is, most of us weren't trained when I trained on computers, and this whole thing is changing so quickly. What do you recommend people think about? How do you go about learning about this and thinking about how you can contribute, perhaps?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple things you could do. One is just start to educate yourself on what is deep learning and artificial intelligence and what does it take. There's three things that in large part it takes to help build one of these applications. You need to have data, and you need to have data that is labeled. So we have a lot of data that resides in our hospital systems, but the data is not in the right format. So we've got to be thinking first and foremost, what is the data that we have, and how could we put it to use? But I think on the other end, what should you be thinking about is, in your daily life, if there's something that you want to do but you can't get to because of a time commitment or you don't have the time or the systems are too hard to get to gather the information, that's the information the tech companies could use to say, well, let's think about how we would break down that barrier of accessing information and making sense of it in a way that would help you do your job better. So, that's where you play a major role is, hospitals are purveyors of the data. You deal with your work day in and day out. And what NVIDIA's role to play here is we're trying to build this tool so that it's accessible to you. And we know these are new computational challenges that are going to be created by artificial intelligence. By definition, artificial intelligence is teaching a computer how to be intelligent. So it's a computing problem. So we don't want to, be short on the delivery of these computers or the computing infrastructure when you've got data and you've got the problem to solve. We want to have all those things coming together at the right time so we can hurry up and get to putting this tool into practice for the better patient care and to make your day more productive.
Now you also, that's great, but you also mentioned something to me at RSNA that you thought that NVIDIA with an artificial intelligence can be built into the scanners.
Yeah.
So I always thought, and this is just my naivete, that I always thought, okay, there'd be a scanner, and then we develop some software, and we just go into this box, and then it comes to me, which seems very logical because there's only 3 boxes. But you were saying that you can build it into the scanner where it could be smart acquisitions and everything else.
Yeah, if you think about it, if you look at today's instruments that we use, let's take a CT scanner. And not to be derogatory, this is one of the most revolutionary instruments in medicine, but it's really kind of dumb and blind in a way that it takes a lot of human power to even appropriately set up the machine, position the patient, and that is just pre-acquisition. And then during acquisition, once you've put the settings in the instrument, it does what it's told. It doesn't do any kind of modular imaging, while it's scanning a patient. And then afterwards, it goes through several systems to do some level of processing to, essentially present you with data that can get you to some kind of decision or outcome or diagnosis more quickly. So in an instrument itself, right now, we're not doing anything intelligently in the pre-acquisition phase or during acquisition, and then in post. And so in the future, I could imagine that these instruments are very intelligent. Siemens showed their CT scanner. They have now equipped it with cameras so that they can automatically do a fantastic job of positioning the patient through artificial intelligence. So we're already seeing it in pre-acquisition. New algorithms and methodologies are going to be used for, let's do the minimum amount of dosage in CT until we either find the organ we're trying to get to, or we found an anomaly, then maybe we can increase the doses just for that period of time. So we're minimizing any dose or harm to patient. And then afterwards, how can we make that workflow for you just something that we experience today in our everyday life at home? Hey, Alexa, please segment me the prostate. Turn it 180 degrees. So you're not having to use your fingers and everything else. You can actually verbally interact with the scanner. So it's a much more seamless workflow and very, very efficient for you to, get the information that you need to do your job.
Right, and that whole idea, because even the thing you were mentioning about the using voice as part of artificial intelligence, to me, we spoke about this, I think, a couple weeks ago on one of these Facebook Live things when I was talking about what I saw at CES. But even the surgeon, like right now, the surgeon wants to see imaging in the OR, someone else has to move the images for them, or they have to break scrub, which is crazy. But just the idea of you doing surgery and say, just rotate that image a little bit 5 degrees to the left, or zoom it up, things like that. So it's interesting because I think one of the things that everyone thinks about is that artificial intelligence will help us read films. But as you mentioned, it's really the gamut of things, right? Because from scheduling, you're mentioning about the predicting who's not going to be at and who's going to come late or not show up. Do you see resistance, from a perspective that no one's going to argue about driverless cars, I guess, unless you're a cab driver, perhaps. But in terms of what challenges do you really see, and what type of time frame do you see this happening?
I can't, it's really hard to predict. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of activity around efficiencies, right? This is where no doctor is going to argue with the fact that, you're scheduling patients better, or you're taking some of the mundane or low value work that you have to do every day off of your work list, and you're doing the very high value work. I mean, that's why you've become a physician in the first place, is you're trying to help the people who need it. So I think nobody's going to argue with that. So for the foreseeable future, we're going to see a lot in workflow, operational efficiency, and then taking away some of the mundane, repetitive work that has to go on. In the 5 to 10 year horizon, after people start to get more comfortable with it, even your mind's going to open up to, well, how could I do this better? Or how could I integrate these other 5, multimodal data types? Because that's really what will help me make a better decision, right? So you'll be more open to it, and the systems will be evolving, or I think we'll feel more comfortable with some of the things becoming more automated, but it's going to allow you to go into a much bigger universe of what's possible. If you think about self-driving cars, my colleague, he says he's not looking forward to it because he loves the act of driving. And I said, but do you know that you are disappointed in where you had to choose your house? because you wanted to be within a certain length of time to work. And I said, you could have your house on a farm with a horse and still get to work in a very productive way if the car drove you, and you could be working the entire time. And so it would change your life completely. So I then convinced him that he wants this self-driving car. And so I think you have to experience this stuff, and over time your mind will open up to what it's going to be good for and how you're going to accept and adopt it. So I can't predict the future, but I hope that we're going to do a lot for patient outcomes, just looking at efficiencies and operational efficiencies and presenting you with the data that is most useful to you. And then in 5 to 10 years time, let's see what amazing instruments we can make, like a self-driving instrument.
And then I think that's wonderful, because I think all of us do know, I gave a talk a couple weeks ago. I may have mentioned that I was speaking at LA Radiology, and I had 2 columns. And I said, okay, 5 years from now, what company is going to make the most difference? And I said Siemens, GE, Philips, Canon, Toshiba. And then I had NVIDIA and Apple and Amazon and Google, and everyone would agree this. Siemens and GE will have faster scanners, better resolution, lower dose, all the usual things that have happened for 30 years. But everyone would agree that's not going to change how good we are.
Yeah.
It's the NVIDIAs where I think the opportunity for better diagnosis, better patient care, I think the ability to change how we manage things. I think that's what's, like I said, it's very exciting, because the driverless car is a good example. I mean, I read an article where when they first started with the real cars, they complained about driverless cars because that was a horse.
Yeah, right.
So it's just turning everything around. So I think it's very exciting, and I think the biggest challenge for radiologists is really, it's not so much embracing it, but figuring out how to adjust and how to get involved and lead the way. So you're going to show a lot of good stuff at RSNA 2018.
I hope so. I can't wait.
Well, we're out of time. Our time is up, but Kimberly is going to be speaking tonight, 5 p.m. So if you're at Hopkins, Chevy Chase Room. If not, you snooze, you lose. And thanks very much for spending time with us, and it's a real honor.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.